Hello everyone, my name is Alicja Sadownik. I'm originally from Gdansk, a Polish city, and since 10 years I've been living in Bergen in Norway, and since 7 years I've been working at the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. And in my presentation, I will tell you about my research on Polish children's and caregivers encounters with the Norwegian Early Childhood Education and Care ECEC. The general theoretical perspective that I use is the cultural historical wholeness approach. It's a Vygotsky-inspired theoretical approach developed by Marianne Hedegaard and Melvin Fleer. I use this model as it continues the Vygotsky's thought of that a human life, human activity, and human development always takes place in a context. And Fleer and Hedegaard precise the context with pointing at institutions like family, preschool, school attended by the child as particular context with their expectations and demands towards individuals, expectations and demands that are anchored in particular traditions and value positions that the culture of the society represents, expectations and demands that form individual motives and thus activities. And of course, these motives and activities does not have to be in line with the institutional expectations, but it's a subject for another story and another presentation. Anyway, not of a lower importance is the level of the state on the very top with its organizational aspect, legal apparatus, and the budget. And what I really, really appreciate in this model is, and the main reason for which I use it really, is that it allows to look at migration as not only an act of crossing administrative borders, but also institutions with their value-based traditions for particular institutional practices, institutions with their particular expectations and demands, often silent, taken for granted, and absolutely obvious for people sharing the same cultural meanings, and absolutely or partly invisible for the newcomers. So this theoretical approach allows them to see and understand an institutional complexity of a family traveling from Poland to Norway, from one culture to another, from one workplace to another, from one institutional setting for children to the other. Yes, and if we have a look on the Polish and Norwegian way of organizing early childhood education and care, their institutional settings for very young children, we will spot the split ECEC offer in Poland with nurseries, żłobki for the youngest children, and preschools, przedszkola, for 3+ years old. Moreover, these two institutional settings operate under two different ministries, nursery under Health and Social Care Ministry and preschools under Ministry of Education. While in Norway, we talk about a joint education and care offer, barnehage, for every child aged 0–5–6. In Norway, the child would seem to be institutionalized from right after the parental leave is over, as it's 97% of children aged 0–5 that are enrolled and participate in ECEC services. In Poland, they are the youngest are mostly the care over the youngest is mostly organized privately, often provided by grandmothers, also nannies. Anyway, the enrollment in the public sphere starts on a greater scale with 3 years old. Another difference refers to the understanding of childhood. Eva Jacyna points at the Polish discourse of childhood as investment in the future, which has been strengthened by the capitalistic democratic transformation in 1989. In Norway, childhood is culturally seen as a valuable period in human life with its own value, where play is the children's way of being in the world and exploring it on own terms. The play in Norway and in the Nordic approach to ECEC generally is appreciated for its own intrinsic value and the self-realization it can give to the child. Play in Poland is rather seen as a learning method, as a way of learning and recognized for its learning value. It's used to approach the learning goals pointed out in the curriculum, podstawa programowa. The Norwegian curriculum, framework plan, rammeplan for barnehager, is focused rather on the ECEC's work to provide all children access to particular experiences. So they are not any learning goals pointed. The kindergarten shall give the children access to this and that. The kindergarten shall give the children opportunity to discover and so on. But there are no learning goals formulated, which is the complete opposite of the Polish curricula, podstawa programowa, that is written with a rhetorics of the child is able to, the child shall get the competence of this and that. So all this here on this slide means that this transition from Poland to Norway is a kind of transition for children and caregivers, because this institutional setting is organized according to different values and different sets of meanings and different organizational solutions. And the empirical examples illustrating some moments of the transition and encounters with the Norwegian barnehage, I will present on the basis of empirical data that I gathered over last 6 years and that are published or in press. The children's perspectives and experiences are coming from 10 interviews conducted with Polish children at their homes in Norway with the presence of the parents. This research is published in European Early Childhood Education Research Journal, as well as in Norwegian professional journal Barnehagefolk in a more popular version. Well, as I said, altogether I interviewed 10 children aged 3 to 9. So some of the interviews were having a retrospective view on the kindergarten experience. The children were interviewed. The children who were interviewed were in Norway at least half a year, like Carolina. It's a fictive name, of course, and no longer than 4 years as Patrick and Agatha. When it comes to the caregivers' perspectives, it was reconstructed through focus group discussions with altogether 30 Polish parents, 18 mothers, 12 fathers. This group wanted, however, to meet and share their experiences over and over again. So I decided to divide them in 6 groups of 5 groups each. And the groups were meeting together and they met 5-6 times each. And it was happening during a period of 9 to 12 months, depending on the group, in 2014 and 2015. And the research turned out to be the platform where sharing and processing own experience of migration and encounters with early childhood education and care settings was of a great importance for the parents. And it is partly published or in press at this time. And what are the results? Well, let's start with the children. They described the migration in terms of transportation that was used to transit from one country to another. So they are pointing at flights and planes and ferries that are being taken and cars. And they also name the culture for children that is different in these 2 countries. So the Koziołek Matołek, a story about one goat famous in Poland, is tripled in the case of Norway, where we have a story about 3 goats, Trebukkene Bruse. Apart from such local details, the children point at the global culture for children as not changing. They also have Elsa and Anna in Norway. They also have Nemo. They also have Angry Birds and so on. And the other thing that the children mention is the different place of the house and missing grandparents and missing friends. And the Norwegian ECEC service, well, which they encounter, is generally seen by the Polish children as a great place for children, as a place good to run, good to play, good for children. But this first impression is quickly confronted by the fact that as a new Polish child without the valid language, without the valid capital to enter any activity setting, activities of play, you can't really be a part of this great place. And this results with a feeling of loneliness and being on the side of the group for major parts of the day. And some of the children got angry and stressed, and some of them were hiding in the bathroom or other places. Some of the children, however, not all of them, just some, got some support that helped them to make the kindergarten activities meaningful for them. Like Patrick tells us, at the beginning, I was only with Nina. She's the language pedagogue. She was teaching me words that I didn't know, and I taught her some Polish. When I learned some Norwegian words, she invited another child, and we were playing a shop, and we could use only these words that I could. And then this boy played with me sometimes on other days. So Patrick was in a way equipped with the linguistic capital that created possibility for participation in a joint activity and then allowed him to develop some social capital. Carolina, however, the example below, is experiencing another kind of support. From a bilingual assistant. The bilingual assistant translates sometimes for Carolina, but also facilitates activities where speaking Polish and knowing Polish is the right capital to have in order to win. So the bilingual assistant creates activity settings where Karolina's capital from the Polish cultural and linguistic context is the valid capital. Then finally, it was me who knew everything, says Karolina. Such situations of being an expert, of being the one who knows and the one who wins, was also very important for Karolina at that time, as she also was struggling in being the competent one, in being the one who is the part of the group. Many of the interviewed children didn't, however, get any support. And the staff told the parents that the language will come naturally on its own and through the play, but children couldn't enter the play because of lack of the language of the capital that allows this encounter, the entrance. At these ages, the interviewed children started in the Norwegian kindergarten. The language used by the Norwegian peers was so advanced that it wasn't possible to enter the play and learn some new words in a playful context. As Damian says, I hated kindergarten, really. I wanted to be at home. I started saying that I was sick, and after a while, I think I really was sick. And his mother explained the story of the psychosomatic disease and that they ended by a doctor. Another quotation is from Agatha, who also was scared and stressed, and her father points out that the kindergarten clearly failed in facilitating her participation, and that he didn't understand why in a country which is so famous for its respect for children, you can meet professional teachers just keeping sitting and watching a child suffering from exclusion. Well, and in the discussion of this paper, I obviously discussed way of supporting and balancing, equipping with the new capital and recognizing the value of the home country and home culture capital. But let's move to the parental experience. Well, the parental trajectory of meaning and experience of the Norwegian ECEC starts with a shock and develops to the fascination in the majority of cases. Mostly they are parents with liberal and not conservative values that develop fascination with the Norwegian model for early childhood education and care. And this is something I discussed in the paper, Princes Don't Run in the Mud, that is in press in an anthology about cultural formation and outdoor activities in Springer. But let's look at the discussion, or one empirical example of a discussion between Polish mothers who are shocked about the meals being served in the Norwegian ECEC service. And they particularly complain about the sausage or instant tomato soup or other quick food that is being used. In the meantime, one of them goes to the nearest supermarket and buys some sausages because once a week there is hot lunch. And then it's excursion day, so they take the sausage with them as well because it's easy for the adults. Then they just tell you that it's so healthy to be outside on the trips, but how logical is this if the children are eating junk food? And parówka, or the sausage, is particularly kind of stigmatized in Poland. And at that days, a Polish Minister of Health has published a brochure about the terrible effects of eating sausages on children. And the discussion between the mothers, however, continues. And suddenly they take another point of view, another perspective on the sausage and the meals, and they started re-experiencing the sausage and the quick food in a completely different way. And it starts with the words that I underlined. But I have to say that I hated the food that was served in my kindergarten when I was little. I was always so stressed because they forced us to eating. It was good, warm, healthy food that I hated. It always stopped in my throat. Mother 2, yeah, I have the same memories. I once even threw up on the teacher who said I had to eat everything from my plate. Mother 3, you are right. I remember this as well. Now I get what they mean by children friendly, that the whole thing starts with thinking of meal as a pleasant and not stressful situation for our children. Exactly. Yes. And this is maybe why we should see the sausage and instant tomato soup as something very much okay. What do you think? Well, yeah, they are sparing our children big traumas which we had been through on our own. I think I might even volunteer to grill the sausage for the next summer party in the kindergarten. Laughter. Yeah, and in the paper that is now in press, I spot several dimensions of the institutional practice that are first perceived in one way, in a very critical way, and then through discussing, sharing the experiences, telling and retelling and getting involved with another perspectives on the practice, the new meanings are being developed. I also have an example of a Polish mother interrupting the routine of picking up by lifting up a problem which is not in line with the institutional demands. And after she's advised by me how to approach the institution by not naming the problem in the first place, but just asking about a meeting where the problem could be discussed, and she succeeds and she's taken seriously and the child gets help. So it's another example that shows how culturally anchored the institutional demands and the proper way of behaving within an institutions are. And it all shows that the language in some cases is not enough, because we have to translate much more than words. We have to translate silent demands and silent expectations that the kindergarten didn't even think about being transparent about. So my conclusions are, generally speaking, that in case of parents, we need to create platforms for processing narratives and experiences, narratives of transition, narratives of experiencing educational institutions, so that new sets of meanings, new experiences, and re-experience can be facilitated. And this is maybe something that not schools or preschools should be responsible for. Maybe this is arena for us, for researchers, for academia, so that we can provide these spots and facilitate good migration processes, meaningful migration processes. And in case of children, I think we need another understanding of diversity and working with diversity within early childhood education and care settings, because diversity is not a collection of difference, but it is a work focused on providing equal participation for all the children, regardless background, regardless home knowledge, regardless family situations. And diversity is, in that case, a context in which we all live. And I discussed it in another paper of mine, Super Diversity as a Trajectory of Diversity. And so look it up if it's of interest. However, it doesn't only focus on the Polish migrant situation in Norway. These are the references of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.